As they say, the more things change, the more they stay the same, and in light of recent events, I'll talk about the first entry into the Wargame series, European Escalation. While suffering a myriad of technical and mechanical issues, its unique setting and challenging gameplay makes it a worthwhile RTS for seasoned players. For this review, I'm focusing on the single player portion. The multiplayer has been made irrelevant thanks to the sequels, and rightly so. World War III is typically used as a narrative framing device for future events. Games like Fallout, Wasteland, and Metro 2033 treat it as a vague series of events with only the end result being remembered. European Escalation instead opts for a moment-by-moment journey through potentially mankind's last war. The single player is broken up into different campaigns, each revolving around what-if historical scenarios where actual events like the Polish Solidarity Movement or the Able Archer exercise were to escalate, bringing Warsaw Pact and NATO forces head-to-head as both sides try to figure out who has the biggest nuclear hard-on. Each storyline is dedicated to a single faction, so you get an interesting thematic and gameplay touch when you encounter the opposing side that you were previously playing as. The cutscenes before each mission are delivered in a purposely dry, tactical way, underlining the emergency of the situation in a professional manner. Being a French-developed game, the English dub and sub is pretty spotty, with sentences ending abruptly, and when the narrator, the only character of the game, tries to deliver some emotion, he receives a failing grade. But the story isn't the focus of the game, nor does it play any significant role, as European Escalation is a very realistic, objective-driven game that focuses around the use of a player's deck. When you want to create your own deck in the custom and multiplayer sections, you've got 25 positions you can fill out with whatever you want. Through variables like choosing units from a specific era, national bloc or class, you can really create your own army. Unlocking units is mostly done in the single player mode, which I'll get into. In regards to E2's levels, you've probably noticed that the maps tend to be wide open fields and farmland instead of urban centres you'd fight through, like in Command & Conquer and World in Conflict. This is more than a mere aesthetic choice, as it revolves around the level design and gameplay, which is a mix of long-range combat and King of the Hill objectives. When you remove the fluff, the main goal of E2 is controlling the most sectors while denying the enemy access to them. Sectors function like in Dawn of War or Company of Heroes, where they net you a constant stream of points you can use in deploying new units. Capturing a sector is done by moving in a command unit and making sure they don't get destroyed. As a combat-oriented game, there's no base building or structures of any sort. Instead, you have sectors at the edges of the map that allow reinforcements to enter. Players who lose control over all their entry zones cuts them off from any backup, which can totally change the course of a fight in an instant. Missions have you accomplishing various objectives across the map. These tend to be securing certain areas or defending a position for a set period of time. Aside from the primary tasks, you also got objectives that can range from rescuing some trapped allies, controlling a specific sector for an allotted time, or destroying support units. Some of these are honestly bullshit, like asking you to fight on 3 different fronts instead of 1, all the while bombarded with heavy artillery, which you also have to take out. Yet you don't really want to ignore them, as completing objectives awards you command stars you can use to unlock units. Most of E2's military gear is unavailable until you purchase them with command stars you accumulate through accomplishing single player missions and leveling up in multiplayer, after which you can deploy them on the map with enough resource points. Wargame titles go all out in the number of historical Eastern and Western military units, all of which you'll get to use. Practically all the tanks, anti-aircraft guns, helicopters, infantry groups, artillery, light armor and reconnaissance vehicles that were developed in the Cold War are here. Your first time seeing the size of a single nation's own unique armed forces is pretty overwhelming, and each unit's different stats doesn't make it easier. In time, you'll get into the groove of browsing over a unit's tile and knowing how effective they are. The armor, speed, weapons, ammo caliber, and range of your troops all matter and will determine the success or failure of most fights. Often, there are different tiers and models that add or improve different equipment to previously unlocked gear. This eventually makes cheaper units much more effective, so long-term investments can prove fruitful. The resource points you accumulate through controlling sectors are doled out in spawning unlocked troops, and since points can take a while to accumulate, you have to decide on what's most needed on the battlefield. It may seem very inviting to charge a platoon's worth of Abrams or T-80s at the enemy's position, but you'll quickly realise in the aftermath how vulnerable you really are. It's high-powered armies fighting each other with the latest technology, making total annihilation of one's forces a sudden occurrence. Take note that your forces are persistent across the missions and campaigns, so losing all your tanks or aircraft and completing an objective can seriously handicap you in finishing the next one. For all of that, the combat is surprisingly straightforward. Targeting someone brings up a reticle which will tell you the engagement distance needed to fire. Your units can take cover in hedges and forestry where they're harder to spot and hit, and vice versa in open environments. While stationary, your units have increased accuracy and faster reload rates. When under fire, the morale will start to drop, becoming less effective and eventually routing if it remains too low. Winning a fight is all about unit values. A high armor rating means a unit can resist low caliber rounds, and likewise, the caliber and types of ammunition fired determine the damage inflicted on the target. Though most of this really only applies to tanks, since everything else can get destroyed with ease. If you remove all the graphical fidelity and flair, you're left with just raw number crunching at work, making it feel more like a board game than a typical RTS. While tanks be the forefront of most strategies, utilising all the other classes will make a profound impact. Infantry are effective multi-role guys, best at mounting ambushes and clearing out urban environments, which can be a death trap for your own vehicles. Recon armor is able to spot enemy forces at great distances while on the move. Artillery can completely level enemy strongpoints, and helicopters can wreck entire tank columns. Eastern and Western armies have their pros and cons. NATO easily fields the best armor and highest quality gear, but the Warsaw pact dominate in air superiority and can unleash lots of units quickly and at a low cost. When fully deployed and mobilized, you've got a nice selection of firepower. Unfortunately, an army doesn't march on its stomach, so you'll constantly need to manage rearm and refit convoys and capture forward operating bases, since you can easily have a tank run out of heat shells or fuel and become a sitting duck. Not good. The UI of E2 is streamlined to a knife's edge, functioning the same way of ground control, with a full 360-degree camera movement and minimal complexity on issuing orders. Believe me, once you get a handle of the unit's classes and their properties, it's a great RTS experience made better with the visual and environmental details. Destroyed vehicles can unleash a forest fire with smoke plumes rising into the sky. Some howitzer rounds can reduce entire neighbourhoods to rubble, and craters will quickly dot the map. Unfortunately, these graphical touches instantly vanish after loading a save, so you can't employ a scorched earth policy. Damn. But alas, Wargame is actually severely brought down by a few incredibly devastating flaws, which can often make the game more frustrating than fair. The issue is how the game allows the AI to completely cheat to raise the artificial difficulty. I'm totally fine with the game having you actually use reconnaissance to spot enemy positions and plan your attack. But while you need to track down the enemy positions across the giant maps, they don't. Your units are always visible to the AI, allowing them to counter any approaching attack with ease and locate your guys without any scouting. I've lost entire sectors because the AI knew exactly what was there and was able to come right out of the blue and destroy the command unit. They will almost always get the first shot off, and have the upper hand in every fight, since while you fumble around directing your tanks, theirs can snipe you without moving an inch. Infantry is essentially worthless, as they can be spotted and destroyed instantly. I really couldn't bother with the dozens of infantry units, as the end result was always the same. I'd approach a position and they get immediately blown up by some tank or mowed down by some MG fire. Your best infantry tactic is just Zerg rush everyone and hope there's enough folks left alive to continue the fight. It isn't fun nor tactically rewarding. Speaking of tactics, while you have to plan around low casualty rates and a stingy supply line, the enemy doesn't, since they can keep on rolling out fresh tanks and helicopters, totally bogging down any progress made. Some missions this makes sense, like being totally cut off from any support or having the entire level revolve around retreating instead of fighting. But while you get progressively weaker, the enemy remains in perfect shape. At the end of one level, I had to secure a bunch of sectors by removing the enemy's control over them. As soon as I attacked one sector, a horde of reinforcements would rush in from the others, quickly wiping me out. So my best option was to send a bunch of helicopters to each sector and destroy the command units before they could respawn, thus clearing the sectors. I really hate how good strategy games like E2 fall apart because of stupid bullshit like this. Now apparently a lot of these problems have arisen after numerous updates that tweak the AI mechanics, but I've only played post-patch, so I really don't know whether the game was actually like this. It may seem I really dislike the game for its frustrating cheapness, but it still remains playable and engrossing, lasting around 30 to 40 hours. The setting is just so fascinating and different from the common sci-fi historical RTS that if you're still interested, then I recommend checking it out.